June 1944. Dawn breaks over hedgerow country. The air smells of wet earth and diesel. A low rumble grows louder, metal treads grinding over stone, engines growling in unison. Through the morning mist they come. Dozens of them, hundreds. American Sherman tanks rolling inland from the beaches, their olive-drab hulls streaked with mud and salt spray. German soldiers peer through field glasses from distant tree lines, and some of them smile. They have heard the reports. They know what these machines are: thin armor, tall silhouette, gasoline engines that burn like torches when pierced. The Americans have sent their coffins on tracks. The Wehrmacht calls them Ronsons after the cigarette lighter. One strike and they light up every time. But the Shermans keep coming. And in the weeks ahead, that mockery will turn to something else entirely. This is the story of how the most underestimated tank of World War II became the hammer that broke the back of Nazi Germany. A story not of invincibility, but of something far more dangerous: inevitability. By the summer of 1944, the Third Reich stood at the edge of collapse, though few yet realized it. In the east, Soviet forces had shattered Army Group Center. In the west, the Allies had finally returned to the continent, storming ashore at Normandy on the 6th of June. But the battle for France would not be won on the beaches. It would be won in the bocage, the dense, tangled hedgerow country of Normandy, where every field was a fortress and every lane a killing ground. The German army waiting there was not the same force that had swept across Europe in 1940. It was bloodied, stretched thin, short on fuel and replacements, but it was far from beaten, and it possessed something the Allies did not: superior armor, the Panther, the Tiger, machines that could kill a Sherman at ranges where the American tank could barely scratch their frontal plates. German tankers had seen Shermans burn in North Africa, in Italy in the first days of Normandy. They had confidence, experience, and a deep, abiding contempt for the American way of war. To them, the Sherman was a symbol of American industrial arrogance: mass-produced, cheap. A tank built by a nation that valued quantity over quality, that thought it could simply drown Germany in steel and gasoline. And in a one-on-one duel, they were right. A Sherman could not trade blows with a Tiger and survive. But war is not a duel. It is a machinery of logistics, coordination, and relentless pressure. And in that machinery, the Sherman was not a weakness. It was a weapon of a different kind. The M4 Sherman was designed in 1941, when America was not yet at war but could see the storm gathering. Its creators faced a brutal calculus: build a few heavy tanks that could dominate the battlefield, or build tens of thousands of medium tanks that could be everywhere at once. They chose the latter. And in that choice, they embedded a philosophy: that wars are won not by the best soldiers or the best machines, but by the side that can keep fighting when the other side runs out of everything. The Sherman weighed 30 tons. It had a 75-millimeter gun, adequate for most targets but weak against heavy German armor. Its armor was sloped but thin, vulnerable to the high-velocity guns of Panthers and Tigers. Its height made it an easy target. Its gasoline engine, though reliable, burned fiercely when penetrated. German propaganda called it a death trap. Allied tankers, in dark humor, called it the Ronson or the Tommy Cooker. But here is what the Sherman also was: reliable, simple to repair, easy to train on, fast enough to exploit breakthroughs, and crucially available. By 1944, American factories were producing Shermans at a rate of over 2,000 per month. They rolled off assembly lines in Detroit, in Cleveland, in a dozen cities across the industrial heartland, then crossed the Atlantic in vast convoys. When a Sherman was destroyed, another took its place, and another, and another. The Tiger tank, by contrast, was a masterpiece of engineering: 88-millimeter gun, thick, sloped armor, nearly invincible from the front. But Germany produced fewer than 2,000 Tigers during the entire war. They broke down frequently. Spare parts were scarce. Fuel was scarcer. A single Tiger might dominate a battlefield for an afternoon, but it could not be everywhere. It could not replace itself. The Sherman could. And so, despite its flaws, despite the jeers of German crews and the fear of Allied tankers, the Sherman became the backbone of the Western Allied advance. Not because it was the best tank, but because it was the right tank. The tank that could win a war of attrition, of logistics, of sheer relentless momentum. July 1944. Normandy has become a killing ground. For 6 weeks, Allied forces have battered themselves against German defenses, gaining miles at the cost of thousands of lives. The hedgerows are a nightmare, thick earthen walls topped with brambles and trees, each one a natural bunker. German infantry, dug in with machine guns and Panzerfausts, exact a bloody toll on every American advance. Shermans advancing down narrow lanes are ambushed, struck from hidden positions, left burning in the summer sun. The Germans are losing slowly, but they are making the Allies pay for every yard. And in their command posts they reassure themselves. The Americans lack the stomach for this kind of war. They lack the quality of men and machines. Their Shermans are inferior. Their tactics are crude. Given time, the Wehrmacht can hold Normandy, perhaps even throw the invaders back into the sea. But they are wrong. On the 25th of July, General Omar Bradley launches Operation Cobra. The plan is simple and devastating. Concentrate overwhelming force on a narrow front, blast a hole in the German line, and pour armor through before the enemy can react. The operation begins with an air bombardment unlike anything seen in the West. Over 1,500 heavy bombers and 400 medium bombers dropped nearly 4,000 tons of explosives on a rectangle of Norman farmland 5 miles wide and 1 mile deep. The earth itself seems to convulse. German positions are obliterated. Entire companies vanish in the firestorm. Survivors stumble from their foxholes, deafened, concussed, unable to comprehend what has just happened. And then the Shermans come. Not in ones and twos, but in columns. Entire armored divisions, driving south and west, exploiting the gap torn in the German line. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions. The 4th and 6th Armored. Hundreds of Shermans, supported by infantry, artillery, and fighter bombers overhead. They move fast, faster than the Germans can reposition, faster than new defenses can be organized. They bypass strongpoints, cut supply lines, encircle entire units. Where they meet resistance, they do not stop to duel. They call in artillery. They call in air support. They suppress the enemy and keep moving. The German commanders watch in mounting horror as the front collapses. Units lose contact with headquarters. Orders arrive hours too late. Panthers and Tigers, individually superior, are overwhelmed by sheer numbers. For every German tank that brews up a Sherman, 3 more Shermans flank it, swarm it, destroy it. The vaunted panzers become isolated, run out of fuel, or are abandoned by crews who realize they are cut off. Within days, the breakout becomes a rout. General George Patton's Third Army roars into Brittany and then wheels east, racing across France. The Shermans that the Germans mocked are now everywhere, on every road, in every village, smashing through defenses faster than the Wehrmacht can retreat. German units are encircled at Falaise. Thousands surrender. Thousands more are killed in desperate attempts to escape the closing trap. And through it all, the Shermans roll on. There is a story told by French civilians in those summer days of 1944, a story that captures something essential about the American arrival. When German soldiers came through a village, they requisitioned food, took what they needed, left the inhabitants with less. When American tankers rolled through, they tossed chocolate bars to children. Hershey bars in their brown wrappers stamped with a logo most Europeans had never seen. Small things, luxuries. The Germans had butter on their bread, rationed carefully. The Americans threw candy from their tanks as if it were nothing. It was abundance made visible. And it was not just chocolate. It was fuel in quantities the Wehrmacht could only dream of. It was ammunition expended freely, replaced overnight. It was spare parts, medical supplies, rations, all flowing forward in an unending stream. The Sherman itself was part of this abundance, not a perfect machine, but a machine that could be everywhere, could be replaced, could keep fighting no matter the cost. To the Germans, this was incomprehensible. They had fought the war their way, with precision, with economy, with the careful hoarding of resources. They had built brilliant tanks, trained superb crews, executed elegant tactics. And yet they were losing, not because the Allies fought better, but because the Allies fought differently, with waste, with redundancy, with the confidence of a nation that could afford to lose 1,000 tanks and build 1,000 more. The chocolate bar became a symbol of this divide. The Germans ate black bread and horsemeat. The Americans ate steak and threw away the rest. And in that contrast lay the doom of the Third Reich. By August, the German army in France is shattered. The survivors stream east, abandoning equipment, discarding weapons, desperate to reach the Rhine. The Allies pursue, and the Shermans are the tip of the spear. They liberate Paris in late August, rolling down the Champs-Élysées as crowds weep with joy. They race across Belgium, reaching the German border by September. For a brief moment, the Wehrmacht stabilizes the line. Supply lines stretch to the breaking point. The Allied advance stalls. The Germans launch a final desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944. Panzers strike through the Ardennes, hoping to split the Allied armies and recapture Antwerp. For a few days, it seems the old magic might return, but the Allies recover. Shermans pour into the Bulge from north and south, grinding down the German offensive. The panzers run out of fuel. The infantry is surrounded. By January, the attack has failed, and the Germans have lost their last strategic reserve. And still the Shermans keep coming. In 1945, they cross the Rhine, smashing through the last German defenses. They drive into the heart of the Reich, meeting Soviet forces at the Elbe. German civilians watch them pass, columns of olive-drab tanks, stretching to the horizon, an endless parade of American steel. Some still cling to the belief that superior German engineering will turn the tide. But the Shermans do not care about engineering. They care about momentum, and they have it. By May, the war in Europe is over. The Wehrmacht, once the most feared military force on earth, has been destroyed. And in the wreckage, among the burned-out Tigers and abandoned Panthers, are the hulks of thousands of Shermans. But for every Sherman that burned, 10 more had taken its place. The Germans had mocked the Sherman, but the Sherman broke their lines, broke their armies, and broke their Reich. There is a temptation, looking back, to judge weapons by their specifications, to compare armor thickness, gun caliber, engine horsepower, and declare a winner. By those metrics, the Sherman loses. It was not the best tank of the war, not even close, but it was the tank that won the war, and that distinction matters. The Sherman succeeded not because it could outfight a Panther in single combat, but because it represented something the Germans could not match: the capacity to endure, to lose and keep fighting, to replace the irreplaceable, to turn industry into strategy and abundance into victory. The Third Reich built wonders of engineering, but it could not build enough of them. It could not fuel them. It could not replace them when they were lost. And so, piece by piece, the Wehrmacht was ground down by an enemy that refused to stop, refused to quit, refused to accept that superior quality could triumph over superior quantity. This was the American way of war, not elegant, not efficient, but devastating in its totality. The Sherman was democracy on tracks, imperfect, mass-produced, expendable, but relentless. Every Sherman lost was a tragedy for the crew inside, but every Sherman built was a promise that the fight would go on, that the line would hold, that freedom, however costly, would prevail. The Germans learned this too late. They learned it in the hedgerows of Normandy, where Shermans swarmed their elite panzers. They learned it in the dash across France, where American armor moved faster than their intelligence could track. They learned it in the ruins of their cities, where Sherman tanks prowled streets that had once seemed invincible. They had mocked the Sherman, called it a lighter, a coffin, a symbol of American weakness. But in the end, it was the Sherman that lit the path to Berlin, and the laughter died.